This is part 2 of Module 2, where we learn to administer the Qualitative Reading Inventory 5. In this video, Joey is reading the Level 4 narrative, Johnny Appleseed. You will need, printed from the folder where you found the link for the video, the examiner's copy of the Level 4 narrative passage, and there's one that's marked and one that's blank. And it's the passage Johnny Appleseed. You may also want your QRI 5 cheat chart just so that you can follow along, and then you'll need to locate the video of Joey reading Johnny Appleseed that's also in this folder. You will need a pencil to mark your miscues and answers to the questions as you follow along. You may want to print the PDF version of these slides to take notes, or you may feel you don't need to. Just to remind you, Joey's a third grader who struggled a little bit learning to read at first, but is doing well now. Says he likes school, likes social studies, likes to read, and it is doing just generally well in school. And to just review the passage administration. To prepare for testing, you can either copy your materials from the book or from the CD that comes in the book. As I've suggested, to laminate the student copies. Remember that you're going to record your sessions, and this is the section where you'll do the fluency. So if you're not video recording or audio recording to where you have a timestamp, then you'll need the stopwatch or a phone app to use for that, and a pencil. This begins with the assessment of prior knowledge, and this is the piece that makes the QRI different from some other IRIs. The concept questions, you'll find the criteria for scoring them, and it's very subjective in the book. The idea is that if the student scores 55% or better on the prior knowledge, then they will score 70% or better on comprehension, as long as they can read the words. And to score the prediction, we're going to count the number of ideas that they explicitly or implicitly are found in the story, and then that the students state in their prediction. All right, so you can pause the PowerPoint right now and go to the video of Joey reading Level 4. Follow along through the prior knowledge questions, and you can either use the blank form and record his answers, or if you prefer, you can follow along on the marked form. And then when you're through watching the prior knowledge section, pause the video and come back here. All right, so what do we know about Joey? He has prior knowledge of Johnny Appleseed quite a bit. Some people think that his alcoholic answer seems odd for a third grader, but just to give you some background, just the week before I saw Joey reading Fantastic Mr. Fox by Roald Dahl in the hallway, where the farmers get drunk on apple cider. So he had very recent background knowledge for that. Joey knows how to put the pieces together for a logical prediction, and this would be considered a familiar text for Joey. So we're going to move on to reading the passages, and remember that you have several options. We're going to use the oral reading and then do miscue analysis. At times you may want to do silent reading. For comprehension, you're going to test their recall through retelling and questions. And we have the option for lookbacks and think alouds. Remember that narrative is easier for most students to retell than expository. Johnny Appleseed, while it's nonfiction, is narrative nonfiction, or in STAR language, literary nonfiction. Remember that you're going to record the student's reading. You're going to mark the miscues using the markings on page 60 and 61 in your manual, and you need to score it on the fly because you need to know where to go from this passage. In marking the miscues, if you've already learned a different method, you don't have to use the marks that are in this book, and you'll see that mine differ a little bit, and we can talk about why. So pause the PowerPoint now and go find the video of Joey reading Level 4, the narrative passage Johnny Appleseed. Follow along as he reads, and you can either record his answers or follow along on the marked form. Again, the markings are on pages 60 and 61, and you can use your own variations. When you're finished listening to him read the passage, come back here and we'll discuss it a little bit before we go on to the retelling and comprehension questions. So what do we know about Joey's oral reading? Well, this level 4 narrative passage was definitely within his independent reading level. You can see that he is making meaning. He self-corrects when he needs to. Some miscues, you know, it's hard to tell whether you mark it as a miscue or not. When he says ragged for ragged, you know, is that it's minor. He says accept for accept. It's hard to tell whether he really knows what that word means and he's just mispronouncing it. And so those are very minor miscues. His fluency, you can look at the scores that are there. I just used the timer that was on the video. The rate was acceptable, and the rate, there's a table of rates in the manual at some point. So his rate on this was within the acceptable range, and he read with prosody. He had phrasing and he had expression, and so all of those oral reading things point to a very proficient reader of this 4th grade narrative passage. So let's pause the video now, pause this PowerPoint now, and go back to the video of Joey reading the level 4 narrative. Follow along, because you're going to go ahead and hear him retell the passage and answer the comprehension questions. And again, you can choose to record or follow along with my marked one. It's important that you try to number the retelling points in sequence. And the more you use the same stories, the more you remember what's there. I always have to go back and fix it a little bit. Then after the retelling, you're going to ask the comprehension questions. I like to skip questions that are clearly answered in the retell, because if you ask them something that they just told you, they look at you like you've got two heads. Like, didn't you hear me? I just said that. The problem with it is, and you'll see this in the next passage, is sometimes when you reconsider exactly how that question is asked, you'll see on the Martin Luther King one that I should have asked a couple of the questions that I didn't, because I marked them as told in the retell. So after you've watched that part, come back here and for some discussion. All right, so what do we know about Joey from his retelling and his comprehension questions? Again, this 4th grade narrative is clearly at his independent level. His retelling, although he didn't hit all the points, it contained elements from all 4 sections and was somewhat sequential. And there were places where the way he told parts of it, it could have been counted in 2 places. I didn't, but I marked it on there that it could have been. Remember that when I asked Joey what retelling was, he said it's a summary. So we might assume that he's been working on summary, which is shorter than what we expect for a retelling, and that if we work just a little bit on retelling with Joey, that he might have an even more complete one. Note that he answers both the explicit and implicit questions easily. So this is clearly within his independent level. So where do we go from here? You can move up to a 5th grade narrative passage, or you could select a 4th grade expository passage. It could be that you say, you know, he's doing so well, I want him to do some silent reading and see if there's a difference. At this point, though, I want to hear a little bit more oral reading, because I know his strengths, but I don't have much to go on as far as his instructional needs. Now, with a reader as proficient as Joey, you're not going to need to do this as often as with our more struggling readers. But early in the year, I want to know exactly what does Joey need, so that I'm being sure that I meet his instructional needs as well as the needs of our more struggling students. All right, this is the end of part 2, the level 4 narrative, Johnny Appleseed. You can pause here, and then the next one is Joey reading the 5th grade narrative passage on Martin Luther King.